Hey, everybody. Welcome to this Sunday edition of the EarMob Podcast. This edition's pretty cool. I think it's pretty damn cool, honestly. So I was able to secure a guest all the way from Dundee, Scotland, halfway around the damn world from where I'm at. Anyways, the cool thing about this is when I was younger, I used to play a game with my buddies, and we'd play almost every day. And that game, we figured Dungeons and Dragons, right? So we used to play this version right here, right? And this version is this was the basic version of the game, right? This version, we played all the modules for this over and over and over again. We all took turns being Dungeon Master, which there's a Dungeon Master's book right there. We all took turns playing this game, being the Dungeon Master, running the games, the modules, whatever. We would go to the mall every Saturday, pool our money together, get the next module, buy it. One of us would pick who was going to run the module. That person would read it, and then we would just play, and we would play, and we would play, and we would play. But the cool thing about this version is that there's still a ton of people that play this version of the game and prefer this version of the game. They feel that this version is the most in-depth version, rules-wise, that the game has ever had. I mean, this version allows you to do whatever the hell you want, and it takes you all the way up into the levels, up into the 30s, where the current version, the 5e version of the game, only takes you to 20. And then after that, you're kind of home brewing stuff. So I've got this. If you notice, look in the corner up here, 10 cents. My mother found these books for me in a used bookstore about 4 or 5 years ago for 10 cents a piece. And they're kind of beat up. They're kind of worn out. And as I was looking through my stuff, trying to find stuff to use for this, I didn't realize that I still had these. The Master's DM book and the Master's Player's book. I didn't realize I still had these. That's crazy. So I used to have all the books and sold them off years ago because I just wasn't playing D&D at that point, or wasn't even playing. Well, I wasn't even playing D&D at all. So I'm going to bring a gentleman on today who was kind enough to decide to come on with me. He's coming all the way from Dundee, Scotland. His name is Richard Hanna. Richard, welcome to the EarMob Podcast. How you doing, buddy?
I'm very good, thanks. And yourself?
I'm great, man. I'm so glad to have you here. We did do an audio version of this originally, but then I decided that I wanted to do video because I'll be frank with you, I hate editing audio, especially after listening to it, doing the podcast, and then having to go back and listen to it. It drives me absolutely nuts trying to edit it. And I'm not editing the guests so much as I'm editing myself, and it drives me absolutely insane. So enough of my yakking. Thank you, sir, for taking some time out of your Sunday afternoon. What time is it currently over there?
It's about 5 p.m. here, and you've just given me a welcome break from doing the decorating. So more than happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It's just about 5 minutes after 10 a.m. where I'm at. So that's the beauty of the internet, that we can talk to each other just like you're in the next room or you're sitting in the room across from me. That's the beauty of it. And I mean, that works out for players of Dungeons and Dragons as well. Because I mean, if there was a time, the time difference is roughly about 7 hours between us. But if you had a game and you invited me, I could play the game with you, and you're located halfway across. You're located thousands of miles away from me, and we could still enjoy the game together. That's the beauty of the internet, and that's the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, you know, everybody who's into it is into it because they enjoy the game, and they just love playing the game. And I know you do, obviously, and you're a dungeon master generally, so you love running the game. How did you get started?
Oh, gee whiz. Well, it was we're delving deep back into the mists of time here, but when I was a kid, we lived out in the Western Isles, and that's on the west coast of Scotland. And I recall, we used to do the weekly shopping at the local army base, the NAFI store. That was where we did the weekly shop. And I recall seeing, the box. I think it was the red box of Dungeons and Dragons in the NAFI one day, and I was just entranced by it, and had to have it. And fortunately, my folks were good enough to buy it for me, and that's when we really started. And I think it was my dad DM'd the first game, and then I kind of took over after that, and used to run games for my brothers and stuff.
Wow. How long did your dad run games for you guys?
No, not a terribly long time. I think it was the first couple of adventures. The introductory adventure in the red box set, Castle Mistamere. I think he ran that for us, and then we kind of took over there. I used to spend hours and hours, drawing maps and going through the box and going through all the spells and figuring out that Meteor Swarm was just monstrous as a spell.
So the version that you originally started with, it wasn't this version, was it?
It was that version, yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so was it your version over there in Europe? Did it come? You said Castle Mistamere?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't remember ever having that one. And I'd bought, all of my friends bought this. I don't remember having that particular module over here. So I'm guessing maybe it was a different configuration for overseas.
Maybe a different printing. Maybe somebody more knowledgeable about the history of D&D printing editions could answer that question. But certainly my version of it came with like a kind of an introductory module. It was just basically, an abandoned castle near the village where you started out, and you would go in and fight harpies and
wow,
yeah, it was great fun. I think that was the castle. So I don't know, does your edition have like the sort of single player introductory adventure in it, the one where you help out the cleric Alina and fight that villain Bargle off?
Yeah. So we've got that. The snake bites you and you die.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's got that one. And actually, I don't know if it has a picture of Bargle in it or not. But it had that. And then it goes through the classes, and there were very limited classes at that point. There was, it wasn't too crazy yet until you got into like advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which was a completely different game at that point. But we played the hell out of the adventures on there. I mean, you had Palace of the Silver Princess and all the modules. And the great thing about those modules back in the day, they were only like 35, 40 pages long. They weren't this 300-page plus campaign. You had to link them together. You had to do that. They didn't give you guidance on doing that if you wanted to go from one module to the next. The only thing that was kind of a drag to me was they would put out like 10 modules, and they were all like levels 1 through 3.
Yeah, there were a lot of choice for levels 1 through 3, and I think the choice sort of diminished. But that's where the game is most fun anyway, is in the early levels, because that's when it's that's when it's dangerous. I think in Dungeons and Dragons, from all editions, I think basically once you start getting up into the higher levels, your characters can do so much that it gets a good deal less dangerous, and you have to throw ever more powerful things at the characters to even challenge them. But I think the earliest levels, basically levels 1 to 5, that's where you're getting the real adventure. There's a real risk of death.
Right. And I'm running a 5e campaign right now. We were doing Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, but we lost a couple of players. So we decided to try something different. Now we're doing Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Right.
And that starts out at level 5. That's the Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage starts out at level 5. And I'm noticing that I'm already going to have to step it up a little bit to make it a little more perilous for my characters, because they're just, even though there's some tougher mobs out there, they're still flying right through them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've got to step this up a little bit, because I think they're feeling a little, what's the word I'm looking for? So they're feeling a little bit too strong, and I want to,
Yeah, you need
punch
to
them
take
in
them
the gut
down
a
a
little
peg or
bit.
two. Yeah, just put the fear of the DM into them.
Right. And I know it's not DM versus the players, but I think that, if it's a little more challenging for them, they might enjoy it more, rather than thinking that they're just going to run right through the whole thing. And, and so one of the things that we had spoken about before was how you feel. Well, let me curtail this question here, and we'll start right from the very bottom of Becmi. You love Becmi, and you prefer, if I'm correct, you told me you prefer playing the Becmi version compared to a lot of the other versions, because you feel that it's a little more perilous and a little tougher and a little raw. Fill me in on that. Why do you like the Becmi version better?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's the one I started with. So I mean, there's always going to be that level of familiarity with it. It's the game I've run for years and years. But I think what I like about it is the way it kind of builds up. Because you get the red box set, and like you say, it's fairly simplistic. You've just got like the 7 classes, and basically you go from levels 1 to 3, and it's a really quite simple game. So it's easy to get into, yeah. But then you start building the other sets on top of it. The companion set, and the master set, and the expert set, and just it keeps on layering on complexity. You start getting into the things like the weapon mastery rules, and then when you're at the companion level, you start running kingdoms and becoming a landowner, and really being a mover and shaker in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And of course, it all tops out with becoming an immortal, which is you basically become a god. It's fantastic. So I love the completeness of the whole system, which I don't think any other system has. Certainly any other version of D&D.
Yeah, and you mentioned, becoming an immortal and running kingdoms, and I don't see a lot of that there's some of that in the 5e rules, like in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that's more for like world building and creating things, but it doesn't touch on it as in depth as the Becmi version. I mean, the Becmi version is kind of the nuts and bolts of everything, and it ties everything together, and I think if people would take the time sometimes to go back and re-explore the Becmi version, if they're doing like homebrew stuff, then they might come away with a different perspective on things.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, it's like I say, it's a complete system. Complete in the sense that you can do anything, and there is some kind of system to support that. In 5th edition, you can go all the way up to 20th level and become almost godlike powerful, and that kind of thing. But it's like you say, where's the mass combat system? Where's the siege rules? Where's rules for transcending the mortal coil, as it were?
Yeah, and when you get into that stuff, I mean, when we were playing, I don't remember going all the way through. So I don't remember getting even into the 20th levels. I mean, there was like a 3 or 4 year period that we played pretty heavily, but generally when we would start a new module, we would roll new characters. Yeah. So we just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. We never would take one character and try to get it through. And I think that's a big regret, of not continuing to play those rules and continuing to play those same characters. And now as I look back, because I'm running games in 5th edition now that I look back, I almost want to, I don't know if I want to run a Becmi game. I'd like to be a character or party member in a Becmi game, but I don't know if I'd want to run a Becmi game. I'd be afraid that I'd get the two systems confused and start, as I'm running the 5e game, I'd, start getting confused on rules and such. So I'd like to be a player. So I've got to find a game there. But so what you mentioned that, you love the rules and you love the fact that there's these rules for siege and mass combat and becoming immortal and running kingdoms and everything like that. Have you gotten that far?
No. And to be honest, like I think very few people have. I mean, your experience probably isn't unusual. I've never gotten that far either, but I like knowing it's there. It's. I think this is a true again across all editions of Dungeons and Dragons. I think a lot of games start to peter out around about 7th or 8th level. Because it does become more difficult to challenge players at that level. So. They tend to run out of steam a little bit, and I think any 5th edition players and dungeon masters would probably agree. And it's like I said before, the best times you have are at the low levels. When you're coming up with the world,
Right.
Scrabbling for every bit of treasure. Because I mean, particularly in Becmi, where you just get oodles and oodles of money because that's what you require to level.
Right. The money, you get the XP for the money, and you get the XP from the monsters. And yeah, it's just so brutal. I mean, even going through the little introductory adventure in here, I mean, it's kind of teaching you how to play. And it's all right, you need to roll this to hit this giant snake.
Yep.
You miss. Then it says, oh, the snake automatically hits you. Now you need to roll this save to see whether you're poisoned or not. Yeah. If you're poisoned, I mean, one more hit and you're dead. I mean, it's literally that crazy. One more hit and you're dead.
What a fantastic introduction, though. I mean, that's the way Dungeons and Dragons is. It is right. It is lethal. That's the standard rule for poison in Becmi. Is if you get hit, and are poisoned and don't make your saving throw, that's it. Dead. Right. It doesn't matter how powerful you are. You could be, king of Theatis, with 1,000 magical items and armies at your disposal. A snake could end you like that.
Right. Yeah, and going back and looking through that, so like I just kind of reread it the other day, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm going, if my guys were up against this, they'd be done. I didn't get back into. I stopped playing around 84, 85, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. And I didn't pick up the game again until 5th edition, and I started playing. It was right around the time that COVID hit.
Yeah.
So I started playing with my buddies again, and my buddy was a dungeon master. So it was a good, experience to jump back into it as a player, because I didn't have to worry about, running the game. And I always had the desire to run the games. And now that I'm running the games, I'm like, oh man, I had to be careful what you wish for, but I almost feel like after reading this stuff again and just the memories of what we used to do, it's almost like 5th edition is watered down, if that makes sense a little bit. It's not as lethal, and it's like, it almost feel like the characters tend to get a little overpowered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's watered down as such. It's very, very easy to look down on 5th edition, when you've been gaming for 30 years, but
right.
What I think what you got to remember is, 5th edition is 30 years worth of experience of streamlining and taking out the stuff that just wasn't used. I mean, like Becmi's got all the mass combat and siege machine rules and all the rest of it, but clearly they're not getting used. They aren't getting used a great deal. So what is the point in including them in the 5th edition game? I'm sure that's probably the conversation that went on at Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. Do we need a mass combat system? The characters don't really take part in them a great deal. I think the focus has become much more narrative almost. Right. With 5th edition, it's more about creating the story, which as players, back in like the late 80s and through the 90s and that kind of thing, we're kind of responsible for kind of driving that style of gaming. We were the ones that came up with World of Darkness and the whole Vampire the Masquerade thing, where it was all looking off into the middle distance and posing.
Right. So you mentioned narrative. Do you include like the role playing? Do you think 5th edition brought role playing more to the forefront, or do you think that, I mean, as far as your experiences, has role play always been big for you when it comes to even playing the Becmi version? I don't remember role playing that much. I just remember, hack and slash. I don't think we really got into role playing.
Well, I mean, I think it kind of depends on the group. I mean, you can role play with any system. It just involves taking that time out. But early editions of Dungeons and Dragons, very much wore the wargaming roots on their sleeve. Because obviously it came out of like the chainmail miniatures game and all the way back in the 70s. So. The early editions very much a lot of wargaming rules. You just look at the rules and you go, that's lifted straight out of a war game. Whereas 5th edition, after being through sort of the transformation and the more narrative style of playing that went on through the 90s and 2000s and that kind of thing, I think 5th edition tends to put that priority a bit higher. There's more thought given to who your character is, why you're adventuring. And of course shows like Critical Role and that kind of thing obviously had a massive impact on it. Everybody wants to have an adventure like the one what's his name, Matt Mercer, like the games he runs.
Yeah, the celebrity dungeon master. Matt Mercer. Everybody's called it the Matt Mercer effect,
Yes.
God bless him. I mean, as far as Matt Mercer is concerned, from my perspective, I've got nothing but props for the guy. I mean, he almost broke the game wide open for people, and he's brought so many more people into the game, and it's great. And he's homebrewing. Yes. I mean, he's coming up with stuff on the fly, and it's a little bit different for those guys because they're voice character actors, so they've had the training for the role playing aspect, and I love that. And even if you didn't have that training and you were thrown into that group, you would be forced to develop those chops, and I like that. And I think as far as playing is concerned, at least from a lot of the people that I've played with, I think they're almost afraid to role play, like really get into it. Like there's some sort of stigma involved with it. And it, I try to prod them to role play a little bit more and really get into it. But I think, you have to be surrounded by people that are good at doing that to develop your chops. It's almost like, because I'm a musician, it's like when I am put into a band situation, if there's musicians in the band that are better than I am, it's inspiring and forces me to be a better player. And I think that's same applies to Dungeons and Dragons. And there's people looking for that, and there's people that want to develop those chops, and as a dungeon master, I mean, if you're not I find it tough to role play some of the NPCs from time to time. It's just, I'm like, how am I going to play this person? How's this voice going to go? That's not going to sound like the innkeeper from 20 minutes ago. How am I going to do this? And I'm not good at, accents and stuff like that. So
No, neither am I. I'm dreadful at them. The only accent I can do with any kind of authenticity is, your standard dwarf.
Right. Russell just commented. He said it was all about the role play and the characters in our groups back in the day. Russ, God bless you, man, because we didn't get any of that. We didn't know what to do. We just had these books, and there was information in the books, and then we were just reading. All right, room number 1, there's a box text. You read that box text, and then it's like you see this 3 skeletons come around the corner with the shields and their swords raised. What do? And that was pretty much it, and we didn't really get into the role-playing thing. And like I said, part of me regrets not playing the same characters over and over again and progressing them and getting into the higher end rules, the siege combat, running your own kingdom. I mean, that sounds like a lot of work, but it's probably very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out in my current campaign. That's where I want to get to. I want to get into these rules this time, because never managed it before. But yeah, I mean, just from what Russell was saying there, it was very much about the characters and the role play back in the day. But as well as that, what we used to do, back, when I was in, high school and, sort of early 20s and that kind of thing, we used to homebrew a lot. And in fact, that was the norm, rather than the exception. It was homebrewed campaigns, and all, everybody used to play with, all the DMs, used to come up with their own adventures and carry the campaign along and that kind of thing. And sure, we would buy modules and that kind of thing, but it would be a case of, maybe we'd lift a map out here and there, or take a villain or a stat block, maybe, but it was just, it was very much picking and choosing. That's a cool magic item, right? Okay, I'm going to lift that out and plop it over here in this castle, which is, actually where the characters are at the moment,
Right. And I think, when I was talking about the, all the modules were like level 1 through 3.
Yeah.
And I looked through the modules. I like, these would be great to tie in together, but your character is going to hit level 3 in that first module.
Yeah.
So then everything past that is completely homebrew as far as monsters and the story, and you've got to level everything up. So by the time they if you wanted to play all those modules, I mean, you're getting into some pretty heavy homebrewing at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of being a GM, I think. I mean, certainly in my experience, I mean, homebrew was the default. I mean, I think part of that possibly is, I started when I was like, it must have been about 10 or 11 years old, So I had pocket money, and pocket money wasn't enough to buy modules.
Right.
Right. So it was, it was either make up your own adventure or nothing,
Right.
And that was the same all the way through high school, and I think as well there was lack of availability up where I lived too. We had nothing in the way of a gaming store. I think back when it was, we had a record shop called Our Price, which stocked Dungeons and Dragons material for a little while, and then that stopped. And the closest place we could go to was Edinburgh, which is about 200 miles down the road from Inverness. So it was a case of, if we could get to Edinburgh, we'd make a trip to the role-playing shop and pick up some bits and pieces there. But other than that, we were carrying on our own with our imaginations to guide us.
Right, and that's a great thing. I mean, at that point, you're developing those chops, and those chops have carried you through all these years that you've been playing the game.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great time doing it. I mean, and like I said, I mean, the real storytelling aspect of RPGs is started to really go mainstream. I think in the 1990s, when it was the World of Darkness and vampire games, where you didn't have a dungeon master anymore, you had a storyteller, and it was much less about the combat and the the crunchiness and the dice rolling, and more about telling the story with your character.
Right. So with Becmi, in your opinion, between Becmi and like say advanced D&D 3.5 or 3.5 and then 5e, in your opinion, what makes Becmi the ultimate version of D&D?
Well, it's like I say, it's the completeness of it. I think, and it's familiarity. But I mean, I thought this even way back in the day. It was a better system because at the same time, Becmi was being published. You had Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the second edition, and that was the one that everybody played.
Okay.
And that's the one where all the modules before all the source books, and it was all Forgotten Realms and that kind of thing at the time. So everybody was playing that, but I always stuck with the basic edition D&D because I thought it just got overly complex. I think the rules got in the way, and when I'm running the game, or even when I'm playing the game, I want the rules out of the way.
Right.
I want to focus on the story and the character interactions and that kind of thing. And there's a place and time for the rules, but if you get into a fight, you want it over quick. You want to get in, roll some dice, and win the fight or not win the fight. So you can get on to find out what's next. What's the villain up to?
Right.
And get on with the story in that case. And I think second edition, started layering on the rules and all the different builds and character classes, and you could be an elfin wizard or a dwarven thief, and you would character generation slowed down, and that's only ever continued throughout all the editions. I mean, you can roll up a character in Becmi in 10 minutes.
Right.
It's literally that quick. You just roll some dice, assign some stats, buy some equipment, boom, character's ready to go. But 5th edition, you're agonizing, well, do I take this feat or that skill or this, or what subclass am I aiming for? And I think promised myself I wasn't going to bag on 5th edition here, but I think part of the drawbacks to 5th edition is that people plan their builds. They're planning to be 20th level, and they start building their character in that. Do I take a level in thief here? Do I take if you're a mage? Apparently, I've not played a great deal of 5th edition, but if you're a mage, apparently, you it's almost required to take a couple of levels in fighter, so you get action surge.
Right.
So people are planning and building their characters up, and theory crafting their characters rather than just playing a character. I think the influence from computer games is partially responsible for that. You want to make a powerful build, but I think with the simplicity of Becmi, basically if you played a dwarf. Every dwarf
was the same.
Yeah. So the way you differentiated your dwarf was by playing the character of the dwarf. I've seen you've got your standard Lord of the Rings style Tolkien dwarves, from straight out the movies, like
right.
gold and beer, and that's about it, But you can play them in a variety of different ways, I remember, I've seen the edgelord dwarf, who's all black bearded and dour and gazing off into the middle distance, and all of that kind of thing. And on the flip side of flip side of it, we've seen a completely loathsome dwarf, who was just a mess all the time, just this horrible grizzled red bearded thing that just stank and put everybody off.
Right. So this whole time that you've been playing Becmi, when you're running a game, do you allow characters to kind of customize their characters beyond the options on the character sheet and what's in the red book and maybe a couple classes that were added here or there? Or do you pretty much just stick to the red book and what's in there as far as character classes? And
no, I'm massively guilty of going outside the rules. And in fact, in the most recent campaign I started, I kind of promised myself and my players, I'm going to try and stick to the rules as written, But the thing is, that's fine. But when you start going through the rules and we start really getting into it, you start going, no, these rules are because Becmi was built in kind of an organic way, then the rule systems don't mesh together. That is the one thing about 5th edition, which is massively superior to Becmi, is everything works together. It's all been streamlined and everything kind of fits. Whereas Becmi, it's jank piled on top of jank.
Right.
And you have to do some work to make the systems all kind of work together. So yeah, I mean, there's Rule of Cool has applied ever since the Becmi days as well. If a character wants to do something cool, and in fact, there is actually, this is what I've talked about with completeness. There is actually a rule for that in Becmi, is your character can't attempt anything if they can make an ability score.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's harder to stick to the rules as written for me, to be honest.
Well, Michael did say here that Richard was always good at improvising with what the characters did and allowed for rule bending if it told a good story. And I think that right there, Michael, that's a testament to you, Richard, because I mean, obviously it shows the fact that you love the game and you love the Becmi rules, but you were in it, you weren't a rule wart. You weren't going to go, all right, we're sticking to this and that's it. Nope, doesn't say that in the book. You don't succeed. Or, you can't play that class, with that race, that type of thing. Where if you're a wizard, you're a human wizard and that's it. There's no elf wizard. There's no dwarf wizard. You're a wizard. You're a thief. That's it. And then they started getting into the other classes. And now with 5th edition, I've got 3 books down here that are just full of different races and classes to play. Yeah. And they're expanding upon that with the new edition that's coming out. And I'm sitting here going, I play predominantly online. So in order to let my characters have access to all those races and classes and everything, I have to buy all those books online.
Yeah.
It's great to have them in a hardcover format, but I've got to buy them online so that they have access to it. And now I just read that D&D Beyond, Hasbro took away the ability to spend $5 just to buy one race or $5 to buy one class. They took that ability away.
Mm-hmm. So you have to buy the whole thing now. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I own the physical book, or books, I should say. If I want to use them online, if I want them on D&D Beyond, I have to pay $30 for D&D Beyond. If I want them on Roll20, which is where I predominantly play most of the time, I have to buy them on Roll20. So it can get expensive as a dungeon master, so my characters are good. They do chip in, my players, if we wanted to start something, they'll each chip in like $10 so that I can buy it. And then they give me a couple weeks to kind of peruse my way through it before we start playing. So at least I look like I half-ass know what I'm doing.
Well, I mean, I think that's Fifth edition gives you a lot of choice, yeah,
Right.
and that's where you kind of have to put your hat on, your world building hat on, and say, does that choice make sense in my world?
Right.
And I mean, for instance, I'm legendary for my hate of Drow. I can't stand them.
Of what?
I dislike Drow intensely. I think they just make for terrible characters, and that's purely down to those Dritz books, the Forgotten Realms ones. But I won't have them in my campaign. They just don't make they don't make sense in my world. Although if I was running maybe a subterranean campaign, yeah, maybe I would have Drow. It's the same with any of the other weirder races that you get in 5th edition. The Dragonborn and the Tieflings and that kind of thing. I think a lot of the time they don't make a great deal of sense in kind of a standard fantasy campaign world of the type that I want to run. I mean, every DM is different. Some people want to be able to have their characters walk into a tavern and it's like the scene out of Star Wars. The Mos Eisley Cantina,
right?
Where you get weirdos in every corner.
Right.
I prefer a more sort of classic feel, where you'll get some elves and dwarves, but they're very much in the minority. The majority of the world is human. I like a more sword and sorcery kind of feel to it, where the world is predominantly human, and elves and dwarves are
the rarity.
They're not so much as a rarity, but more unusual.
If you go back and you watch some of the movies in the 80s that kind of like it's kind of based on I don't want to say based on Dungeons and Dragons, but because D&D was so popular back then, there were movies that came out. And if you go back and off the top of my head, I can't think of a movie, obviously, and I brought it up.
Off the Slayer and that kind of
right.
thing. Yeah.
But if you go back and you watch them, there'd be like 4 members of the party were human,
mm-hmm.
and then there'd be like a dwarf, or there'd be one strange character.
Yeah.
One strange race of the party. It wasn't as varied as 5e allows you to do. And I think with 5e, I think the reason that they do that is because nowadays, like you said, there's the video game aspect of it that people want to be a part of. But I think a big part of it is they want to be a little more inclusive
mm-hmm.
to everybody. And that's a big part of D&D, is being inclusive to everybody. And it's funny for me is like just the other day, I was talking to somebody at work and she was wearing a shirt, and I noticed right on the back in the middle of the shirt, right between her shoulder blades, was the Critical Role logo.
Right.
And I said, "Oh, you got a Critical Role shirt on. Great." And then we started talking, and I had worked with this person for a year and had no idea that they played D&D. And that's the big thing of it. She probably had no idea that I played, and I think it's cool that way that anybody can sit down and play the game. And now it's to the point where I remember like going into high school, I didn't want anybody to know that I played.
Yeah,
played. I'm like, oh, I don't want. No, that's not cool.
That's the nerds in the basement game. Right. We don't admit to that. But I think the world has changed a great deal. As I said, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is, it's mainstream. That movie came out, the one with Chris Pine in it.
It was great.
I wouldn't call it great.
Look, it was great for what it was. I enjoyed it, and that was the whole point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't The Godfather, but I enjoyed it, and that was the whole point. It's just to walk in and step out of reality for an hour and a half, which is exactly what a movie's supposed to do.
It was definitely a damn sight better than the one they had. I think was it late 90s?
Oh, yeah.
The one with Jeremy Irons in it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was pretty dire.
Yeah, you know what? I think I watched that one once. I can't remember anything about it. I'll have to go back and watch it. But that might be the death knell for me. I was like, I don't know, if I
Wait,
should go
two
back and
sequels
watch
to
it.
it. Can you believe that? 2 sequels, and each
Oh,
one was worse than the last.
that was like somebody admitted one of my favorite movies is Slapshot with
Right.
right? Everybody knows Slapshot, greatest sports movie of all time next to Caddyshack. Anyways, so I watched Slapshot, absolutely love it. So then I buy it and it's paired up with Slapshot 2 DVD. And my buddy's like, don't watch Slapshot 2. It'll ruin it for you. I'm like, no, it can't be that bad. I put it in. I make it a half hour into it. I'm like, I can't watch this. It's going to ruin Slapshot for me,
Oh, I know. There's so many movies. Highlander's the prime example. Highlander, fantastic movie. But Highlander 2 was just dreadful, absolutely awful.
So when it comes to Becmi and when it comes to Becmi rules, what do you think as far as the rules and how the mechanics of Becmi, off the top of your head, what is one thing that if you were writing Becmi and somebody presented to you, what would you go, nah, that makes no sense at all. What let's fix that. What would I change?
That's an easy one. Descending armor class. It's bonkers.
I knew you were going to say that because that's what everybody says, that damn THACO system.
Yeah, it's just I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but hey, we're stuck with it now. I did consider, when I was starting up the most recent campaign, I thought, should I just ditch it and just have ascending armor class? And then I thought, now I've got all these source books, all of these things, and all these characters and monsters are going to have descending. I'd have to rewrite everything or translate everything on the fly as I was running the game. So, no, stuck with it. Unfortunately, that's just one of those dodgy decisions which is going to be stuck with us till the end of the time. And THACO's not so bad. Once you get your head around it, it's a pretty easy calculation,
Well, see, and we had James Mackey posted up death at 0. So explain that to me. Tell me what he means, because I didn't catch that when I was just kind of perusing through these again. So what does he mean by that?
Well, as you said before, Becmi is harsh. And when you hit 0 hit points, you're dead. That's it.
There's no death saves.
No death saves. Although, again, Becmi does actually have that optional rule. There is an optional rule for death saves, but I've decided not to run with it because, and the reason for it is because I have included it in the past in previous campaigns. I know exactly where James is coming from. It does feel horrendously unfair to get to 0 hit points and that's it. Just your character's finished.
Yeah, but I mean, there's if I walk out on the street and get hit by a car and essentially get knocked down to 0 hit points, I'm not unconscious.
Yeah,
yeah,
but but there's the chance that paramedics could get to you in time. You might be hanging on. And I can see the dramatic situations that could come from that. Our fighter's been struck down by the vampire, and he's bleeding out. We need to get to him and get a healing spell onto him so he doesn't die. But I decided to do away with it in this game, and the reason I did so was because I think that the death saving throws they cheapen the other thing. I wanted to include the other option, of course, for avoiding character death is the raise dead spell. Yeah.
Right.
And in previous campaigns, I've had the death saving throw, but I disallowed the resurrection. And I wanted to flip it this time and do it the other way around. So I've disallowed the death saving throws and that kind of thing. But resurrection will be a thing in this campaign. When the characters get high enough level, to cast it themselves, or find friendly priests that will resurrect dead characters and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to change it up this time around. But like I say, Becmi has complete system. It has the rule for it. There is an option for death saving throws.
Yeah, James posted again. He said -10 in AD&D was a great rule change, but I still enjoy Becmi. Best way to survive though is clever play, retreat often. And see, that's what I'm running into. My player characters in the current campaign that I'm running, they refuse. They don't retreat. They don't do anything like that. So I've been unable to brush up and use any of those rules in 5e for retreating, and that, because they simply won't do it. They're just like, oh, we're invincible. And that was the word I was looking for a while back. Oh, we're invincible. Yeah. And they run in and they just fight. And they're level 5. And it almost to me feels like they're invincible.
Yeah. Well, the cure for that is to vince them, basically.
Right. Right.
Get in a character death. Or don't do it deliberately, obviously, because that's horrible. But if they do stupid things and rush the bad guys, don't feel bad about if the dice go against them. Stick with the dice.
Right.
Don't fudge it. If somebody if they get hit and they get hit hard and that kills them, then that's it. They're dead. And you need to I think as well is put in dangerous enough situations that they can be killed, and that will soon the party will become more cautious after that, and they'll start becoming a bit more inventive, rather than rushing into the fight. I mean, fights are fun. You want to have a few of them, but they'll start maybe thinking more about, well, how can we avoid a fight maybe, and still get to our objective. And that's where the role playing starts to come in, right. And they'll start thinking outside the box, and that's where you have to be on the fly as a DM. Is like players will come up with mad ideas, but if it's a good idea, then you'll need to think of some roles they could make to succeed.
Right. So Rich, we've been going for just shy of an hour. So if you want, we can take like a little 5-minute break, and that gives us the opportunity to refresh our drinks and everything. I'm actually at this point, I am going to play a video. It's a buddy of mine. It's his band. They're called Mojo Aces, and this song is called Old Crow. It's kind of cool. It's kind of like a Zeppelin, Black Crowsy, Southern type vibe. So check it out, Rich. See if you dig it. Everybody check it out. We'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes to continue our chat. Thanks, Richard. Hang tight.
No.
Get the bottle service ready, a little nightcap before we're gone. Is it me or you who she's talking to? Well, I can't make that call, but whiskey fixes everything. I'll stick with my old crew, 'cause it'll burn me up when it goes on down. But it feels my kind when you're not. The only thing I know is everywhere I go, my get-out crow never lets me down. Oh, never lets me down, no. can't quite recall. The reason that it started, or the reason that it caused. But it's good for me, ain't no telling me the opposite at all. Cause whiskey fixes everything, I'll stick with my old crew. Cause it burns me up when it goes on down. But it fills my car when you're not around. The only thing I know is everywhere I go, my good old crow never lets me down. No, don't let me
All right, that was my friend Eric Levy. Eric Levy, I'm not sure. He's going to kill me for screwing it up if I did. But he's the drummer in that band, and I'm a drummer, so we have that connection. We're both huge Zeppelin fans as well. And it just dawned on me watching that video where it shows, they're taking band photos and everything. Why the hell does the drummer always have to be in the back? I mean, we're in the back on stage. We're always in the very back on the photos. I mean, it's just not fair, Rich. I'm pissed. So couldn't have gotten that cough out of the way while we were watching that video, I guess. So going back to Becmi, as far as the modules are concerned, what is your go-to module, like the one that holds a place in your heart, the module that you absolutely love? And then what is the one that you absolutely cannot stand? And we'll take it. Let's do this. We'll start with just the B modules.
Okay. I as I say, I mean, we homebrewed a lot of our stuff back in the day, but I haven't read through them recently. I mean, Palace of the Silver Princess is great, really good. And the one I just ran recently, actually, Caldwell's Castle, is dreadful.
And I was thinking of running that one, like doing a conversion of it. And then when I had talked to you previously, I'm like, oh, maybe not.
As written, it's very, very bad. There's lots of just utter nonsense in there. I think you get to the second level and there's this whole weird teleport kind of trap thing, and it just doesn't make any sense. And the other thing I didn't like about it was. I'm all for a bit of lethality, but I think there's kind of a chance that the characters, I think it should come as a result of the characters' actions, but I think one of the first things that happens when you go into the second level of Caldwell's Castle is a doppelganger will attempt to pick off like the weakest member of the party and then take his place and that kind of thing. And that's given the lethality of Becmi, that's easy to do. You just has if you doppelgangers being intelligent creatures, will just wait until the right moment to strike and then grab the thief, who's only going to have like 4 hit points or something like that, stick him and then take his place. So I didn't like the doppelganger at all. And there's loads of other stupid things, to get out the dungeon at the end, you have to translate something and it comes out as, oh, what a goose I am. It's it doesn't make a sense. So I actually rewrote Caldwell's Castle quite extensively, and I put some cool stuff, got rid of the nonsense and made it kind of thematically well put together and that kind of thing, and put like an ancient tomb in the second level, the tomb of a forgotten dwarven lord, that it was still deadly. There was all kinds of horrible undead and that kind of thing, and there was a toll on the party, but I think it hung together an awful lot better. I thought anyway, and I think my players would agree with me.
Right, and I think the poorly written and sections that just doesn't make sense. That's not just a Becmi thing. That's been all through Dungeons and Dragons, including 5e stuff. I mentioned Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus earlier, and it's just like, hey, you're outside the gates and you need to do this. And the first thing I was reading it and I'm like, well, why am I outside the gates trying to get into Baldur's Gate? Right? I know the backstory, but what am I going to tell the characters? And then as I started reading online, one of the things was to properly run Baldur's Gate, you've got to go buy this homebrewed thing off of RPG Drive-Thru or wherever it is. You've got to go buy this little homebrew thing and have your characters run through that. Then that little homebrewed thing will get them invested in running the rest of the campaign.
Right. Yeah.
And in order to run it properly, the way it should be ran, you've got to go get this other thing that's not even an official product. It's just some little thing.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you've ever taken a peek or that or ran it, playing 5e or anything like that. But then the other thing is, as soon as you get into Baldur's Gate, the main captain of this militia inside Baldur's Gate tells you have to go find this person. And then immediately I'm reading online and people are tearing it apart. They're like, why would he send you guys at level 1 to go find this person when he's got this whole militia to go find this person? Why would he send you? So I get it. Everything's subjective and nothing's ever going to be perfect for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But what you brought up about the whole, the doppelganger and the illusion and the second level, that's nothing new to Dungeons and Dragons.
No, definitely not. There's some of the bot modules where it's like you look at it and you read through some of the monsters that they're putting into the rooms, and it's obvious that basically they've just flipped through the monster manual or whatever, stopped at a page. Okay, that looks good. It fits with the level. Drop that in, without any thought about why it's there. On the flip side of that, there are some modules which are fantastic, really well thematically put together, and everything. Horror on the Hill is fantastic. It's really good. Very, very. Everything kind of fits together. I know you get some weird stuff in there, but it all makes sense in terms of the module,
Right. You had just mentioned like they had just kind of flipped through the monster manual and dropped some stuff in that were appropriate level. Back to Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. My players are, I think they're 5th or 6th level at this point, and they're actually down in Avernus and they haven't gone down onto hell. They're in hell, but they haven't dropped down onto the surface of hell. But they're in El Terrell. I'm sorry. So they're in this area, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, this next encounter doesn't make sense. It's like an NPC with 5 or 6 giant crabs. What are crabs doing in El Terrell? Where do these crabs get? And it just immediately, as soon as I saw giant crabs, I'm like, that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
So for me, James Mackey mentions Isle of Dread, and that is one, like, I started to read through, and I think that right there, along with Palace of the Silver Princess, that brought me back to when I first started playing. And I'm like, man, I want to play these. I want to play these modules. So should I try to convert them? Luckily, Goodman Games has already converted Isle of Dread. You can get Isle of Dread from them, and it's a thicker book, but it has the original Becmi version. It has interviews with a bunch of people, and then it has the converted one in there as well.
I think Goodman Games is doing a few of those, aren't they? I knew they'd done the Isle of Dread one, but I think they're doing some other ones as well.
Yeah, they've done
all power to them. I think that's fantastic.
Right, and they're even doing AD&D modules.
Uh-huh.
And because I play on Roll20, somebody, if you play on Roll20 and you're watching this, James or John or Michael, let me know if those games were if those modules were available from Goodman Games on Roll20. I'd buy them and play them. It just seems to me like there's some homebrew. There's not a lot of homebrew stuff on there, but the official stuff is on there, and obviously the Pathfinder stuff is on there. But I want to be able to. I don't want to have to throw a map on Roll20 from an old module and plug everything on it. It's just too time consuming to me, especially when those old dungeons are huge.
Yeah.
And then to drop all the stuff on there, I don't want to be bothered with it. I just want to be able to buy the module and do it. It's different if I'm homebrewing something and I throw an ancient ruined cathedral on there, and I got to plug in an NPC and like 3 or 4 monsters. That's different. But when I have to do all the dynamic lighting and set all that up, that's time consuming. If it's official and it's somebody else has already done it, then I'll pay them for their work. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
But to have to do it myself and sit there, I'm a very busy person. I don't have time to do that. And it just kind of bums me out. But when we're getting back to like the Becmi stuff and like Isle of Dread and stuff like that, I mean, Isle of Dread just seems, from what I just kind of perused through, it's so wide open as far as possibilities on what you can do in that module.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that was like the introduction to the expert game, where
right.
You got beyond the dungeon, basically.
Right.
That was the idea, So you're out into the wilderness, and I think the current term for it these days is a hex crawl, which is a term I've seen bandied around recently. So that's the idea. It's instead of dungeon exploration, it's wilderness exploration, and that's where you get your wandering monster tables for outside the dungeon and all the rest of it. And I mean, it's on my roadmap to do, definitely, because it's an absolute classic. And again, thematically, everything holds together in that. You got your native village and the dinosaurs and the tribes of, is it Phanatons or something like that? Sort of.
I'm not 100% sure. See, that's a cool thing, that it's introducing dinosaurs. And if you're thinking about, like, you're running a medieval campaign and you've got sorcerers and you've got fighters and thieves and stuff like that, the last thing that you would ever think that would be there would be dinosaurs. So I mean, you're on the Isle of Dread, and it's just a completely it ties in, but it's so completely separate from everything too that it just opens up this whole thing.
It's a classic trope, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's a classic adventure trope. I mean, you can grab that characters from any time period. Drop them onto a jungle island, and suddenly dinosaurs and adventure and hijinks ensues. And it doesn't matter whether it's fantasy. It could be 18th century. King Kong's a perfect example. Or to Jurassic Park in modern times. You get a group of adventurers together, dump them in a jungle, throw dinosaurs at them. Always good.
I see you got the rules encyclopedia behind you.
Yes, absolutely. The best thing I think that ever came out for Becmi. So I mean, everything.
Is that that's an original right there?
That's an original. Yep.
Well worn, I see. Good job.
Indeed. Yep. Much played with and tossed in boxes and moved between house and house and house. So pristine it is not, but still very much serviceable. Yeah,
I remember when I was younger, I had a box, like your standard office files box.
Yeah.
And it had all my D&D stuff in it, the modules, the books, I had the original Dungeons and Dragons rule book, not the original, sword and sorcery stuff, but the old chainmail stuff. None of that. It was just, I had the stuff past that, and I had all the modules and all my dice and everything. And just one day I'm like, going into high school, I can't play this anymore. So I gave it to my cousins.
Oh, no.
And about 6 months ago, I reached out to them. I'm like, by chance, you guys still have that stuff? I'll pay for you to ship it to me if you still have it. No, we don't have it. I'm like, oh, man.
The thing is you don't realize the value of it at the time. I mean, before I had the rules encyclopedia there, I had all the old box sets, the red box right through the gold box. And I left them all at a girl's house and never got them back.
Wow. Well, you don't know.
That was the end of those. And the thing is like, these go for hundreds of pounds now.
Right.
If you look on, what's the one? The shop on the Borderlands. They quite often have, old prints of original prints of Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I think I was looking on there the other day, and it was a red box D&D set, and it was like £560. That equates to what, $700 or $800, I think.
Right.
Crazy amounts of money, And
when you can go to Drive-Thru RPG and order a printed copy of the PDF for $15.
And thank God you can, actually, because drive-through is great. I've gotten loads of stuff. I genuinely don't care about the collecting part of it. I know plenty of people do. Fair enough. That's the thing. They want to get all the original copies and all that. Put them up in their glass shelves or whatever. Right. I don't care. I want the book for what's in it. So drive-through is fantastic. What a great resource.
Yeah, I had. When I was young, I used because I'm a musician, I obviously love music. And Led Zeppelin, I had an original Led Zeppelin poster, like the original print from the last shows they played in the US in Oakland, California, 1977. I had an original one. I paid $50 for it in like 1989. That was like, I did whatever I could to come up with the $50 to pay for it, right? Spent $100 on the frame, getting it mounted and matted and everything. And then about 6 years ago, I'm like, man, I'm so paranoid about this poster, and it's worth about $500-$600, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, I'm so paranoid about this. I'm just going to sell it and let somebody else obsess over it, because I can get a reprint of it for $25 on eBay, and it looks exactly the same on the wall, and I can get a cheap frame for it, and I'm not stressing out over it.
Yeah.
And I never spent the $25 to get a reprint, but I did sell it.
Yeah.
And I was, part of me was bummed I was letting it go, because I'd had it for, 30 years or whatever. But the other part of me was like, you know what? Let somebody else enjoy it.
Yeah.
And the same with Drive Through RPG. Now, if I want the book, I mean, I have them all on PDF.
Yeah.
And I can peruse them. But there's something to be said about actually having the physical book.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, not that I can, not that I can read them anymore. Just it just gotten to me. I have to take the glasses off to read things. But
right.
I think, I didn't feel right about using. I mean, I've got all the gazetteers, all the supplements for Becmi and that kind of thing. But I never, and I've always had them on PDF. As soon as I could find them on PDF, I just downloaded them because I wanted to read them. But I never ever felt right about using them unless I actually bought the book, and had a physical copy. Sort of last year, I finally completed the collection. It's taken 30 years to do, but I finally completed the collection, got all the gazetteers.
Right. Well, see, now you're an expert on Karamikos.
If anybody can be, and I think there's very few of those. Maybe Thorvald Tate. I think he's one of the guys that, or is it Thorvin Tate? I can't remember. He's one of the guys that runs the Vaults of Pandius, which is the Mystara website. So I think it's actually officially recognized by.
I think I read something the other day that they were bringing with the new edition. I thought I read that they were bringing Dragonlance back, and I'm not sure, but I thought that I saw that they were bringing that back. And for me, their whole thing is they want everything to be backwards compatible, and everything's been set in Faerun.
Yeah,
and
I think Dragonlance. I think if they are bringing Dragonlance back, I think that's a very good move, right? In my opinion, because Dragonlance is a very, it's a coherent, kind of thematically strong world, in my opinion. Faerun it's just a hodgepodge of everything. It's just basically a dumping ground for slapping everything into it. Anything and everything can be in Faerun, and as a result, I think it's kind of diffuse. But Dragonlance very thematically strong. You've got your dragons and your dragonborn, and you have the good gods versus the evil gods. And they've got a strong. The novelization for them was great as well. The Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, etc. That whole series by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. Still, a very, very good read. Right.
I mean, there's just so much out there. They want to bring Dragonlance back, and they brought Planescape back, and they did Strixhaven for 5e, and you got Castle Keep or Candle Keep. And I mean, they're bringing all this stuff back in and bring they did Strahd and
Ravenloft's a perennial favorite,
Right. So when are we going to get that Mystara box set? When are they going to bring all this stuff back? I mean, they've got guys such as yourself still playing the Becmi stuff. For me, I realized that if they were to take the time, I mean, there's a lot of effort and a lot of money that would go into making Mystara happen for 5e or the new version, which is, what is it? D&D 1 or whatever they're calling it at this point. I don't know. The books are supposed to start coming out this month, I think. June, we're getting a player's handbook, I think.
Yeah.
If you want it to be backwards compatible and all inclusive in that Dungeon Masters book, give us the correct formulas to fix the armor class, for the Becmi stuff, to convert it. I've seen tables online on how to do it, and it made no sense to me whatsoever. I'm like, I don't know what this person's doing. And I had somebody try to explain to me this is all you have to do. You bring this down, you bring this up, and then I'm like, I'm out. I'm out. You know, I have no idea. So those of us that, you know, I can't say, I was going to say those of us that have been playing all these years, but I'm not included in that. You know, those of us who started way back then and took a break, and then, you know, those guys such as yourself that have been playing all this time, you know, give us the nostalgia factor. And I get that they're trying to bring more people in, but you know what? Give us some of that old nostalgia. And I think that's what Goodman Games is doing good.
Yeah, I would love to see Mastara come back, you know, for 5th edition. I mean, I'm not 5th edition strongest fan, but
right.
I would love to see the setting back in print again. I mean, Mastara's a little bit guilty of the same kind of hodgepodge that Faerun is, but there's lots of nice kind of secrets and mysteries that go on in Mystara behind the scenes, and the whole idea of the Immortals was genius in my opinion. You know, it's like, because you know they're on the same power level as gods, but every immortal started out as a mortal.
Right.
You know, so you know, none of these guys popped into existence just as a personification of some kind of abstract concept, you know?
Right.
It's like, you know, if there's an immortal of war, then he would have been a warrior sometime back in the dim and distant past who grew so powerful he became immortal.
Right.
You know, and I think that's it's not something I've seen elsewhere, you know, and I think it very much I think it kind of makes the gods feel a bit, I don't know, visceral, I suppose, you know, a bit more connected to what's going on.
Well, it also gives that one first level player the idea in the back of their head that I could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no limit. No
right.
limit.
And you haven't made it that far within the 30 years plus years that you've been playing. You know, I can't imagine, and I would like to find out from people, you know, that obviously in the D&D community, people still playing Becmi, if they've gotten that far or how close they've gotten, and if they got flustered by the fact that it just seemed like they got us to a certain point and that just wasn't achievable. And I would like to hear from DMs that have maybe gotten players that far, because I know there were modules that kind of went up to that point.
There's right?
a whole
bunch of them, yeah.
Right. But it also kind of left it wide open for the DM to have to figure some stuff out on their own as well. You know, because that's a lot of XP to get to that point. A lot of XP. But like, you know, again, with Becmi, your loot, you know, your coin went towards XP as well. Whereas in 5e, it really doesn't. And I think there's probably a rule that it can, but I think almost like I don't know. I think 5e is great and I enjoy playing it, but just for me, and it could be the fact that I haven't played Becmi since like 1980, whatever, you know, 84, 85. But a part of me, after talking to you and then thinking about, you know, he's right, it's actually lethal. I'm like, oh man, that sounds good. That sounds good, you know, because now it's just like my player characters are kind of steamrolling through a lot of stuff. And now I'm like, man, I got to put some extra work in to making sure that they've got to second guess some of their choices rather than just running in, you know, guns blazing or whatever, you know, swords drawn. But you got to think this a little bit.
You got to be upfront with the players about it as well. You know, from the outset. You know, I mean, you could run 5th edition, lethally as well. You know, right. You absolutely could. But you've got to be upfront with the players at the start. You know, I'm going to run a lethal campaign here. There's no take backs. You know, basically, if the dice are against you, you're finished. You know, I think a lot of the time, people start out a 5th edition campaign and they watch the Critical Role and they expect that they'll write a 2-page backstory for the character.
Right.
They'll expect your wannabe Matt Mercer to pick up that storyline and craft something special for them, which is fine. Genuinely, no problem at all with that. I'm playing games with that style of play, and they're great fun. Dungeons and Dragons Becmi, I think, lends itself to a more life is cheap kind of situation.
Right. So, okay. So I'm going to throw this at you. As far as what you've done the entire career of your playing, has there been a certain goal that you've wanted to achieve as a dungeon master or even as a player that you haven't quite hit yet?
Oh, that's a tough one. That is a really tough one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you really did get me there. I think maybe it's Wrath of the Immortals, actually, which is one of the big. It's basically the campaign ender for a Mystara campaign. So it's basically the gods go to war basically across Mystara. The whole world erupts in a massive world war. And it ends up with the empire of Alphatia sinking into the ocean, and that's there's lots of analogs to kind of the real world in Mystara, and Alphatia is the fantasy equivalent of Atlantis, yeah,
right.
So this is the whole this is the death of Atlantis kind of campaign. I've always wanted to run it, because it gets referenced so much through, across the internet, through so much source material. Some people don't like it. Some people, prefer not to see an entire empire just wiped off the face of the map. But I always wanted to run it, that big Armageddon scenario, where just everything goes bonkers. I've had big bads before, and maybe nation level threats, but nothing a worldwide threat that I've not run yet. I really kind of fancy it.
How close have you gotten to that point?
Oh, never very far. Never very far. I've like I say, I've gotten to the nation level threats with hints at possibly invasions from the outer planes and that kind of thing, but never. The campaign's petered out before that point.
Right.
But I'd really like to run a party through, the end of the world basically,
right,
and have them right at the center of it.
So as far as player characters, what's the highest level that you've gotten your players to, or currently, or just over the history of playing?
Over the history of playing, I don't think I'm not even sure we've ever got. No, I tell a lie. I did in university. I did get a group up to name level, which was ninth level ish, 9th and 10th level, and that's the sort of point where you can start owning land and running kingdoms and that kind of thing. But dropped out of university shortly after that, so that was the end of that campaign.
Sure.
But that's about as high and the nation level stuff is great as well. That's really good fun. It's very much that's where you can really get the politics and intrigues out. Who hates who and who's against who, and play bad guys off each other and that kind of thing. Really good fun intrigue scenarios that way. So I'm looking forward to that. But never, as I say, the loads of fun at the early levels, but I've never really managed to run a really high level game yet. So I'm going to try for that this time. Okay.
So are you running your games strictly online, or you actually have a group together that meets personally?
Oh, we're strictly online at the moment. I mean, the thing, I'm from Inverness originally, which is
Right.
100 or so miles up the road from here. And that's where all my gaming group is from. That's all the people I went to school with and, worked with in my early 20s. And that's where our gaming group was formed. But since that time, everybody's moved away. Folks in Glasgow, folks living in England now, some still up in Inverness. So it was always kind of difficult to get a game together, Then the pandemic hit, and it was that was actually a good thing for us because up until that point, we'd never really tried the online gaming thing, and because we couldn't get together and game, I would still play when I went up the road, once or twice a year, but now that everybody was getting online and getting onto the Zoom calls and the online, the virtual tabletops and that kind of thing, we could actually get together. So, I mean, I've done more role playing in the last 3 years than I've done in the last 10.
Right.
Simply because we can all get together and play online and continue campaigns that have been running for years. My friend Robert runs Pendragon, and he's been running the same game for, I don't know, must be 30 years plus, 35 even, continuous history all along that time.
Wow.
And it's a joy to be part of. It's a fantastic game. It's all Knights of King Arthur and that kind of thing.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, you in that game, because of that history,
right.
You could be doing something over in, maybe South Wales or something like that, and a baddie will pop up that you haven't actually seen in 10 years, in real time.
I can't imagine the notes that he must have to keep that game going. Just the history.
I've seen him when we do play in person. He's got like a huge hold all that he carries around, all the books and all the notes and everything else in it. And wow. it takes two people to carry it out to the car,
Yeah, see, and I bitch about having to carry around the 3 core rule books. But we don't play in person. It's all done using Roll20, and then we use Discord for voice and stuff. That way I can send them, photos and stuff like that. But are you using, you mentioned Zoom, are you strictly Zoom, or are you using like Roll20 or Foundry or something like that?
Use Zoom mainly. Just taken up for my D&D game, just taken up using Owlbear Rodeo.
Okay.
I found was, I didn't like Foundry and Roll20 and that kind of. I thought they were just too overblown. There was no way I was going to be messing around setting up dynamic lighting and all that.
Yeah, see, and that's getting back to that. When I have to bring a map into Roll20, it does take a little time. I mean, I've done it enough now that I'm pretty proficient at doing it, but it does take enough time to do it. That takes away from other things. But again, when you're homebrewing and stuff like that. But before, were you do theater of the mind at all? Like, are you telling people, hey, you're in this room ahead of you? It's this 40 by 40 room. There's a passageway to the north, trying to describe the map. See, I went back to that and I was going to do that. I'm like, all right, we're running theater of the mind. We're going old school Becmi, theater of the mind. And then I'm like, how the hell am I going to describe these maps to these people for them to get it right? And that was part of it, But
well, to be honest, theater of the mind was like the primary way I used to run things. Owlbear Rodeo is like the first time I've actually kind of used a game board or a battle map for running the game, and I'm enjoying it a great deal. Actually, it's a way I've never played before with actually having counters and moving them around physically on a map.
Right.
Theater of Mind was the default back in the day. Basically you would go into a room, you'd roughly describe it in the dimensions, and and then if there was a group of orcs there, for instance, it would be just a case of, right, well, 2 on you, 2 on you, 2 on you, or something like that.
Right.
You would basically just you would do it you would just wing it, do it on the fly. Do whatever was felt dramatic.
Yeah, and thinking about that, doing theater of the mind, I started thinking about back to when we were all playing as kids, and it was nothing to just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm like, oh my boy, that is so daunting. I that scares the hell out of me, But when you're 12, that was the only way to play. There wasn't, Owlbear Rodeo. There were no. We barely had Commodore 64 computers at that point.
I know, right?
Yeah. We were just sit down in a circle and everybody play, and you rolled your dice, and you didn't have any fancy dice. It was like, oh man, those orange dice are cool. I'm going to buy those. Or green or whatever. You just didn't have anything special. Now everybody's 3D printing dice.
Yeah. Oh, and to be honest, like the 3D printers have been great for the game. I used to run. We had a little lunchtime game going at work. We'd stop for lunch and we'd play. That's my experience of 5th edition, was playing that just during lunch times. And one of the guys, he got a 3D printer and he was playing around with it. And the stuff he was coming up with was great. He'd print like little miniatures. He printed like a whole ship.
Right.
We had like a pirate ship fight. Printed out this whole ship's deck and that kind of thing, and tentacles which were coming up from the table to grab characters. It was great. And as I said, I've never really played much with miniatures or anything like that. I get. A lot of people do, and that's fine. But it was kind of a new thing for me. I think there's ups and downs to both. If you're playing with miniatures or tokens, if you run out of miniatures or run out of tokens, what do? Theater of the mind is, it's less visual, so you're relying a bit more on players to fill in the blanks. But at the end of the day, your special effects budget is unlimited in theater.
Right.
You can do anything you want,
Right. So as we're going to start wrapping this up, I did want to ask you, if you had the opportunity to describe Becmi in a way to somebody that had never played before, in the hopes of drawing them into playing, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with this, that's why I'm asking, if you had the ability to, how would you describe Becmi in a way to try to get people to play Becmi over some of the other versions?
I think, it's the original, it's the OG.
Right.
This is where all the other systems come from. It's basically, or it's one of the OGs. It ran alongside AD&D Second Edition, which was the other sort of big product at the time. But it's one of the original things, and it, as Mike says, it's unforgiving. It's the game you want to run if you want to have some real danger.
Right.
And and it's all kind of about highs and lows. Yeah. If you've got capable characters and no fear of death, you're like that. If you've got characters who are weak, sure you're going to die. But see, when you win, it's like that.
Right.
It feels fantastic. If you make that roll of a 20, to put down a bad guy, when your buddy's on one hit point and the next hit will kill him. And we had that happen actually just in the last game I run. Yeah. It was genuinely the case. One of the guys, one more hit and he was finished. And then I think somebody rolled a 20 and put an end to the threat before it could get to him. And that's great. There's just no beating that. And the thing is like these 20 rolls, they're less common in Becmi. 5th edition, I think operates on a level above 20, if you know what I mean. You know, it's
Oh yeah. Sometimes you'd have to. There's some monsters like armor class 30, and you're like, what the hell am I going to do here? I can't throw that against these level 5 characters. And the thing that with 5e that I've noticed is the critical roll, like you said, is way more common because they're like with fighters, they reach a certain level. I think it's level 5 to where they have the ability at that point to where a 19 is also considered a critical.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they could roll a 19 or a 20 and it'd be a critical.
Yeah.
Or they've got the strength bonuses and that type of thing. So if they roll a 17th and their strength bonus is 3, it's not considered a critical, but it's still a 20. So if the big baddie's got an armor class of 19 or 20, they're hitting.
Yeah.
So it to me, like 5e, like you said, it's not as unforgiving as Becmi.
It's very much, I think, influenced more by superhero movies, to be honest. I mean, it is very much it feels kind of like your characters are preternaturally strong. Whereas in Becmi, much less the case. You are much more on the normal person kind of plane of effect. So it means that when you win against the odds, you win big. And it feels great.
So, Rich, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me.
No problem.
It's been a blast. I enjoyed it. I knew we'd get into some pretty hairy stuff, and we did. And I appreciate your brutal honesty on a lot of things too. And I know you didn't want to slag off 5e, and I don't think we did. I think we just kind of, you compared the two, and I agree with what you're saying. And now I almost kind of don't want to go back to my 5e. But I thank you again. Do you have anything to plug? Is there anything you want to, take a minute to talk about here real quick?
Just to mention it, if anybody's interested in keeping up the adventures of my current campaign, you can find that all over on www.theaterofthemind.net.
Theaterofthemind.net. Okay.
Yeah,
and I know
that's my website where I post all of the group's adventures and various other bits and bobs.
Okay. Well, Richard, thank you, sir.
No problem at all.
I appreciate your time. You have a great day, and we'll chat soon, all right?
No worries, Chaz. It's been I've had a blast. Yeah, it's been a great time.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. You have a good day.
All right, man.
All right, take care. So that was Richard Hanna all the way from Scotland joining me to talk about the Becmi version of Dungeons & Dragons. So thank you, Richard. Again, thank you for everybody who commented and took the time to watch the podcast and show your comments, type them to me and everything. So again, you can see kind of scrolling on the bottom of the page. If you liked what you saw, you can go, we're on facebook.com/EarMob Podcast is the main page. Go over there, follow the page, like the page. Again, you can see it there when we go live. It's also available on YouTube. I think I am going to switch from YouTube to Rumble, though. I'm not sure. I may keep it at YouTube for a while, but it is available there at YouTube. The same thing, EarMob Podcast, at EarMob Podcast. You can subscribe over there, hit that notification bell. So when I do go live, you'll be notified on your phone or computer, whatever you're watching, that we are going live. Just for those of you who've never watched a podcast before, you'll notice up in the corner, I've got the alien holding the peace sign with the headphones on. I am a drummer. That's a bass drum. He's holding drumsticks in his hand with the peace sign. There's drumsticks. You can see the podcasting microphone on the logo. It's an alien because I am into aliens and UFOs and stuff. So this particular podcast, I'm going to talk about whatever the hell interests me. So it could be different from episode to episode. If you're into that stuff, please stick around. Again, follow, share, do whatever subscribe, do whatever you need to do to follow me. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please share this with all of your friends. Let's start building on this. And again, if any of you out there have been playing Dungeons and Dragons and do a lot of home brewing and write your own stuff, I'd love to chat with you, maybe get you on here to promote your stuff and talk about it, and let everybody know why you homebrew and what you get out of it. So again, hit me up if you do a lot of that stuff. I'd love to talk to you. If you're somebody that has had one of your adventures published, or somebody that writes stuff that actually gets published online or in physical form, reach out to them, see if they'd be interested in coming on, share this, let them know. Again, I appreciate it. I am going to do one more thing here. I'm going to play one more song to take us out. This is a song that I think a lot of people need right now. So I'm going to go ahead and play this as we're going out of here. Take care.